Okay, hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's live Q&A webinar. Today we're discussing how top companies are protecting their data. My name is Dimitri Petropoulos. I head up business development here at Global Micro. We are the leading provider of IT management and cybersecurity solutions, and if like me, you're eager to learn about how to look into the right places to identify vulnerabilities that our businesses face related to cybercrime. If you need to know how to prioritize those risks and how to implement some necessary cybersecurity solutions, then I think you're in great company today. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session. We're going to post the link on our website along with some related content. And then we'd like to hear from you during today's session. If you have a question for our speakers, please feel free to type them into the chat box in the Zoom control panel. We have some dedicated time for questions at the end. And if we don't get a chance to get to your question, we'll be sure to follow up afterwards. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. We have with us JJ Milner. He's the Managing Director, Tech Entrepreneur, and founder of Global Micro almost 30 years ago, JJ. Additionally, as a Chief Architect, he is instrumental in helping our customers and partners understand the opportunities and risks of new technologies. JJ has offered to lead the Q&A today. So JJ, welcome and thanks for your time.
Thanks for the introduction.
Cool. Our guest speaker today is the guy who knows security, not just technology. He knows how to fix every one of our businesses. David Stelzl is a CISSP, which is a Certified Information Systems Security Professional. He's an industry expert in the fields of information security and has been working in data security now for almost 20 years. So he's worked with a lot of companies over the world, addressing business leaders on the strategies that they need to use, especially the strategies used by some of the cyber gangs. And he offers insight into why even the most well-equipped companies are losing the battle against cyber attacks. He's also the author of 5 books, including Digital Money, Data at Risk, and The House in the Cloud. So please join me in welcoming David Stelzl. David, great to have you with us.
Well, thank you.
Good. So I think to get things started, JJ, I'll just pass the mic over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. David, what does it mean to be secure?
It's such a broad question, but I think when I think of data security, I think of the data inside a company today being one of the most important assets that any company really has. All of us are data-driven today, and whether it's customer data or financial data or whatever it is. And so the question in my mind always when I'm talking with a company about their data, where that data is do they have some level of confidentiality? Can they maintain the integrity of that data? Do they have the access to that data that they need to have? And I measure that by looking at, well, what's the impact if I identify the different types of data in my organization, what's most important? And I use a little graph like an X and Y axis, and I think about the different applications that run this company, what that data is, and what would be the impact if I couldn't get to it, or if it were compromised, or if it would be misused. And the question then, which everyone should be asking, is, well, what's the likelihood? And if I could, that something bad would happen. If I could just give a quick illustration. When I go to the doctor every year for, say, a physical, the one thing I really want to know from my doctor is, I know what the impact would be, or I have a sense of what the impact would be if I were to have a heart attack this year, or be diagnosed with cancer, or some life-threatening or life-changing health condition. And what I want to know from that individual is, well, what's the likelihood that any one of those things would happen to me over the next 12 months? And if it's highly likely, what do I need to do to reduce that likelihood and maintain it until I come back next year? And I think that's what every business leader today needs to be asking. What is the likelihood that one of these big things will happen that will impact my business? How do I reduce that likelihood and maintain it over the long haul?
And what are some of the mistakes that you find companies are making when going on that journey to prioritize these risks?
So probably the biggest mistake is to think that this is a technical problem. I mean, it is technology, and that's where the data comes from, and we're using applications, computers, and all that sort of thing. But it really is a business issue because it's a business asset. And as I look around a company, an organization, I think less about the routers and the switches and the workstations and the phones and all the things that they're using. I think more about the people who are sitting there doing their jobs. They're good at whatever they do: accounts payable, accounts receivable, customer service, order taking, manufacturing something, designing something. But most of those people have no clue what it means to keep that data secure. In fact, a lot of them are bored with the data that they're looking at because they see it all the time and they think, who would want this? It's not really worth anything. And what ends up happening is they end up doing things with that data that shouldn't be done. As a great example, I was recently booking a car with a hotel, and the person sent me back a confirmation with my credit card number in the email. It's plain text email sent to me. And I emailed them back and I just said to him, you got my credit card in this email. Do you have any idea what would happen if I were to contact the corporation and share with them that the guy booking my car has just put my credit card number in my email? And, to him, it's just, he's just doing his job. He's trying to get it done fast. And that's what everyone out there seems to be doing, because that's what they're focused on. And no one's thinking about how important is this data, who would want it, and what would happen if somebody got it.
And of course, with COVID now, all the rules are being rewritten. I took note when you said that you're not so worried about switches and routers and firewalls and things like that. It's the Wild West now. Everyone's at home on a network no one ever anticipated them being on. How has COVID and work from home in this sort of situation affected your thinking in terms of how companies should approach security?
Well, there are several things that have happened with this work at home thing that are good in terms of getting people equipped to really be able to work anywhere. But a lot of people haven't thought about how this changes security. And, people don't, the company themselves, I hope that they're assessing their risk. I hope they're looking at, how secure is our network, how secure are our applications. And I hope there's somebody, some technology person who's overseeing that and keeping it under wraps. But as soon as somebody goes home, they might as well be working at a hotel or a coffee shop or out on a public network somewhere. And we really have no idea who's on that network. But worse than that is, depending on where in the country you are, there's a lot of the students have come home. So I know that they're sitting on the same networks, and who knows what they're doing. So a lot of young people, if people listening today aren't really aware of this, a lot of the young folks are gaming and doing different kinds of things, music exchange, movie exchange, different things that involve peer-to-peer networks. So they're installing software in their computers that allow their computers to connect to everybody else's computers and kind of share all kinds of stuff and use protocols that exchange information directly between computers. And if you don't understand how that actually works, there was a study done not too long ago where a guy went out and searched the peer-to-peer networks. So he installed the software on a computer and then began running searches, but not for other people doing games and that sort of thing. But he just simply wrote a little bit of code, very simple thing to do, to look for things like spreadsheets, things that had names like payroll, financial, password. And he came back with just boatloads of files that contained all kinds of banking information, payroll information, personal information, legal information. I mean, all kinds of stuff, because kids are using the same computers that their parents are using and have shared the drive, have shared the computer with their friends, and it's just out on the internet. So that's one issue. Another issue is nobody at home understands how to maintain a network. Are there up-to-date patches? High level of encryption? Is it even password protected? Did the person who installed the network from some cable company or whatever system they have leave the password admin? I had that happen at my place when I moved into a new home. I had them come in, they installed it, and I said, well, what's the password on the router? Admin. How many people would think to ask? How many people would think to change it? Not many.
Yeah, and it's not atypical for a service provider to use the same secret password.
Right. That's right.
Right. So that staff can remember it.
Exactly, across all systems.
And
so those are some of the issues. And let me just mention one other issue just that really is important. Once data gets on somebody's personal device, the business leader should be asking who owns that data, because the business leader does not have the right to go wipe somebody's computer or phone or tablet. And you better believe that data is sitting on personal devices if they're working at home somewhere.
So you know, are there any particular vertical markets that are most at risk?
You know, the verticals, there are some verticals that are definitely at risk, but I actually would like to mention another way to look at business. So we have verticals. Yeah, healthcare is always under fire. Financial always is, although there's a lot of regulations in place for financial data, and they tend to, at least if they're following compliance, tend to have a lot of things in place to, you know, mitigate risk on that sort of thing. But when I look at mid-market and smaller businesses, I find that they don't have the expertise on site, but yet they think they do. So I don't know who all is listening to us here today, but when I think about data security, and I'm talking to people who are in IT, and I come out of the IT world, it was 1995 when I got really involved in data security. And it wasn't long before I realized this is a highly specialized area. This is no different than the eye surgeon or the heart surgeon versus your local practitioner in your local town. And you would never go to your local general family doctor and say, hey, you know, my heart's bothering me. Can you operate on me? Or, you know, I can't see, I need, you know, cataract surgery. You would never let that person do that on your body because they haven't been trained in those specific things. But yet, the typical response from a lot of IT organizations and IT folks is, we've got that covered. You know, yeah, we understand security too. But the fact is, it is a whole different field. And so we need to view it that way. And we need to think, yeah, you use a specialist to do data security. You use a specialist to do disaster recovery planning and business continuity planning. You use a specialist for other things. Right. And when you don't think that way, then you end up just listening to that person go, yeah, we got it covered. And the fact is, nobody has it covered. Even a security expert doesn't have it covered.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that leads me to my next question is you can open up any paper, and it doesn't matter whether it's a small company, a big company, what industry it is, there's a hack in the newspaper every day. So, you know, is the security industry fear-mongering? And there's nothing practical anyone can do. If Twitter's going to get hacked by a 17-year-old with a social engineering attack, you know, what chance have our customers got, and is it even worth them, you know, making the effort?
Yeah, I think that just recently someone came to me and said that they believe somebody's broken into their email should they contact the authorities. And they suspected they knew who it might be, somebody who wanted information from them. And I said to them, the authorities aren't going to do anything for you. They can't. You're one individual, or you're a small business, or you're a mid-sized business, and they don't have the capacity to deal with the number of cyber situations going on right now. The fact is, a business has to protect themselves. But the problem is, we've been told by product manufacturers going all the way back to the early 90s that if you put this in place, it will stop the hacker. And the fact is, it won't. So, you know, the analogy that I like to think about in the security space is your home, right? We put stuff in our homes all the time, and you know, in some places you have extreme measures. You have barbed wire around your development or around your area. In other areas, you might just have fences, or you may not have any fence at all, but you've got locks and doors and windows, and you close those things, and then you install alarms, and some of us have motion detectors and, you know, cameras outside and all this sort of thing. We put these things in place to protect our home. But the fact is, people can always break in. The thing that protects a home is not all the components. You can put all that stuff in place, and it helps, but it's actually a system that has to be at work behind security to make it work. And that's a system that has a level of protection to keep people out, like the doors and the windows and the locks, but they'll always fail if somebody really wants to get into your home. You're really just keeping your neighbors out and insects and that sort of thing, and animals. But then we have this level of detection, the alarms and motion detectors. But then there has to be a response plan. And when I'm speaking to a live audience, I like to ask the group, if tonight, if a group of people broke into your home with the intent to rob you and were prepared to harm you if you got in the way, what would happen? So they'd come to your home, they'd break your door down. Okay, well, that didn't work. And then your alarm would go off. Okay, well, that did work. And hopefully you're connected to some service that notifies the authorities. And so maybe that works. And maybe they do notify the authorities. But then what happens? And usually there's a, kind of a silence in the room because they don't have any response plan. They don't know. We were hoping the authorities would stop them, but it's going to take them 20 or 30 minutes to get here, depending on where you live. Well, in the data security world, what I find is we don't even have that detection piece in place. People put in a firewall, passwords, they've encrypted things, they've done all this stuff to keep their data secure, but the fact is the hacker can always get by that. And so then what happens? And it takes about 200 days for a company to recognize we've in fact been violated. And many times we'll read in the paper of a company who found 3 years, 4 years later. And many companies won't find out until it's just too late and there's no way to recover. So security should be a level of protection with a focus on detection and then a response plan that happens fast enough to stop it before it's too late. No different than a burglar. It's going to be obvious to somebody when somebody breaks into a data network, but they have to be watching, and there has to be the technology in place to see that happen. And there has to be somebody there who's knowledgeable enough to see it and stop it.
So why are so few companies prepared to detect and respond to these sort of threats, David?
Well, the message has been out there. I started writing about this in 2007 when people were still, pushing that whole protection. But even Gartner Group now has come along, and many other analyst groups have come along and said, yeah, that's true. In fact, the NIST standard, spells that out as well. One of the security standards out there. There needs to be a focus on detection and response. And Gartner Group comes along and says about 90% of the security budget is really spent on that first protection piece and very little on detection. Well, why is that? I think it's an education thing. I think the people out there providing security, technology companies, have not embraced that. Many of them claim to be security people, just like I mentioned the IT folks. They have it on their website, but they're not really. They're just sharing the line from the manufacturers that they represent. And in fact, I was at a manufacturer's conference recently who is a name brand firewall, and the guy on the stage, when he opened up, the first thing he said is, our focus is on protection because detection's too late. That's not true. Real-time detection is the only way to do it. And he's convincing the market, just use my thing and you'll be fine. And the fact is, that's a lie. They've been lied to. They don't know the difference.
Yeah, and detection is hard, right? Because it's the volume of data, the number of systems, the number of logs that are coming through, the correlation and understanding what all of that information is doing. That's difficult even with big budgets to do. And so I think you're right. I think people go towards the product line of use this elixir and you won't have to worry about that problem.
And it would be nice if that worked. That'd be the easiest solution. The fact is, you really kind of need to partner with a company that does that full time and watch, just like you would with your alarm system. You connect to some company out there that monitors your alarm and notifies the authorities. That's the way a business should be done. And if you outsource that, if you think about true keeping people out type security, go back to the house analogy. If I try to keep people out of my home with no law enforcement, I'd have to build enormous walls and make it into a castle, and it would still not be impenetrable, but that would be really costly to actually do that. It would be cheaper in the long run to just have somebody put the technology in place that watches traffic and have the people that understand how to do that watch it. In the long run, that's going to be the better solution.
And how often do you think people should be assessing their security requirements, David?
Well, if they have that detection thing going on, as we just explained, and they really are watching the data, and I don't, some people do things like, scan their network occasionally and that sort of thing. It's not enough. They have to be watching the data. But still, things pop up, architectural problems. We saw some of the major retail chains recently, over the last couple of years, have been hacked into through things like their HVAC system. And they're not going to find that unless somebody looks at their network. So, I encourage people to do an annual, full-blown security assessment, but then to have some kind of quarterly checkup. There's going to be a punch list, no different than building a home. You're going to walk through and see things, and this should be done immediately. This is critical. That should be done over the next quarter. Really, this year, we should try to tackle this and get this in order. Some of those things are less urgent, but over time, they all need to be done. So if I'm watching my traffic real time, all the time, I'm going to know if somebody's hacking in, and I'm going to have the tools and the people in place to stop that. And then annually, I'm going to be looking at the overall architecture, considering different projects that I'm doing in the digital transformation era we're in. And quarterly, I'm going to be following up on those punch list items and making sure there is a plan in place and people are putting those in place over the course of the year.
And I mean, you mentioned these lists, right? I mean, do we download those off your website? What has to be included?
Oh, in the assessment process?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The data security field is one of those fields where you could call almost anything an assessment. So this is a problem. You can ask somebody, can you do a security assessment? They'll say, sure, and they'll just put together a network scanner and just scan your network and say, oh, everything looks good, or these couple of things, patches are missing, or something like that. But that's not really the way this should be done. The way this should be approached, if you're familiar with disaster recovery planning, I like the way they do this. They usually start out by going in and talking to the business leadership and asking the question, what data is most important to this company? What has to be protected? And what about it has to be protected? Is it its confidentiality? Is it its integrity? Is it the availability? It might be all three. It might be two. One might be important than another, but I want to know that. And then the second thing I want to know is, how do people use and create and delete or archive data? So now I'm talking about the users. Who's doing what in what department, and what kind of data do they create or use on a daily basis to run this business? And how does that data move through its life cycle from being created to being used to being stored or deleted? And all data should have a life cycle like that that's documented. Now, once I see that and I look at how people do this, the workflow, if you will, in the business, now I know what's important, I know how the data is created, how it's used, and what happens in its life cycle, then I can ask the question, and this really is an internal, security expert sitting around the table going, okay, here's what they do, here's how they create data, here's the flow of that data, here's who has access internally as well as external partners, third party, whoever. Now, what would need to be true for this environment to exist and still be secure? At what level? Because you can never have perfect security. So how much risk can I stand? And once I understand that, then out of that pops a list of things to look for. Is this encrypted? Is this locked down? Is this highly available? This can only be down this long, so therefore this must be true. And I can go through my network environment, my applications, my data, and I can make sure those things are in place, and I can prioritize what's not right. And most of the time, there's going to be stuff that's just not right. Now, once I do that, there's one other step, and that is largely left out. I have to take a look at the traffic. So remember I said you should be looking at the traffic all the time, but in the process of the assessment, somebody really has to look at the traffic to see, because frequently, if somebody's in there doing something wrong, it will show up in the traffic. This computer will be talking to somebody outside the country that we don't know, and you'll see it when you look at the traffic and you go, that's not right. There's something not right here. We need to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that in our data center environments, David, we lock all traffic down and we only allow things out that we're expecting to happen, as opposed to the opposite, where we let everything go down and then slowly try to play whack-a-mole and close things out. And a canary in the coal mine for us is if we suddenly see new traffic on the network, that either means that a device was put on there, or someone set it up the wrong way because it shouldn't be behaving that way. So that's easy to do in relatively easy to do in a data center environment, less so in a home or with people on the move. But I mean, to what degree should our customers be keeping up with security trends? Is that something that the security provider must be doing for them? It's a specialist field. What do they do?
I think there are, two answers to that. It really is impossible for the general IT organization to be on top of all the security stuff because it is a specialty field. It's too technical for the people who are running the business and working in the departments. So their level of keeping up really needs to be some kind of user awareness thing that's happening. And that really should happen from a company that has security expertise. So I know that your company does those kinds of things. That's important. If your company has their eye on what's happening globally in the security space and what's worrisome right now, what are the trends, then communicating that to the end user population, and that leadership, of course, has to endorse that and make time for it. That's going to be super important. But the actual how hacks are happening and what kind of technology is being used, that's back to the medical field. The specialist has to be, reading the journals and going to the courses and doing all that sort of stuff to be on top of it so that they can provide it to the customer. Customers just have to get used to the fact that if we're going to live in a digital world, they need an expert on hand, just like they need a doctor, a lawyer, whatever other kinds of advisors are in their life. Well, this is one of them. I need a security advisor to make sure that my stuff is taken care of.
And do you find that there is an overlap between, we have a number of customers on the call who are in regulated industries and they have compliance requirements. Is compliance security and is security compliance, or?
I say it's not. Compliance is an interesting thing. It's a law. You have to be compliant. And the way I look at compliance is this. Every business wishes their government would protect them from outside threats. And of course, a lot of the hack threats come from outside the country or at least outside the legal population, right? And so what's happening is we're all, not we necessarily, but all the businesses out there are looking to the government saying, do something. I'm seeing all these companies being hacked into, do something. And so they do something. They put together all these compliance regulations. And when I read through the compliance regulations, what I find is none of this stuff is actually going to ever stop a hacker. It's maybe it keeps the good people out. It keeps healthcare information. It keeps that person from reading my healthcare records by accident or by that doctor sharing stuff with people I didn't really want them to share. But as soon as the hacker gets involved, they don't care about any of that stuff. They will always just go around it. So do you need to be compliant? Yeah, it's the law. But once you're compliant, you ought to start thinking, but are we secure? And now it's time to assess, just as I described, and get in there and lock things down. And compliance will never be able to do that. It's just not what it is.
So what steps should companies take today to ensure that their data is secure?
Well, when I speak at live events, I usually ask for a raise of hands. How many people have assessed their security, their exposure, their impact versus likelihood over the last 12 months? And if we had, 30 or 40 people in that room, I'd say probably 2 or 3 might raise their hand. And at that point, I'd say, did they deliver to you the risk measurement? Did they show you your impact likelihood graph? Or did they just give you kind of a, you're not in good shape, you're okay, or you're great? And usually it's the latter. Nobody really understands what their impact likelihood looks like, but they need to. And so what's the next step? The next step is to have somebody look at your traffic, look to see if you have been compromised, because you can't stand to wait 200 days. You need to know now. And if it's fine, then just keep checking on some regular basis and get some detection in place. But if there is an issue, and likely if you haven't been watching, there is, and then you need to stop, you need to get on that right away.
Well, thank you. That's been very insightful. Dimitri, have we got any questions from the team that David and myself could address?
Yeah, let's quickly have a look. I think first question came from Yanni. She asked, working from home, how secure is a Wi-Fi connection that connects to VPN global network? Am I secure as long as I'm connected?
Okay, so using a VPN network is a great step, although there are a couple of things that need to be looked at in conjunction with that. So when I have a VPN, I'm using software on my computer, and it's going to encrypt the traffic from my computer to its destination. So let's say that's my corporation, and I'm going into some server there. So that's good. I've encrypted my traffic, and I've cut out a lot of the middle people that could take a look at that traffic. What I haven't done, though, is made sure that my endpoint here is secure. So I'm on my home network, and picture the average person at home. So half the time in the evening, they're watching movies, they're surfing the net, perhaps their kids are on the computer playing games or looking at who knows what, and who knows what, right? It could be anything. And so if during that time people have compromised my computer, which is highly likely if I haven't put things on my computer to detect some kind of malicious code software that's been installed on here somewhere through some link click somewhere, email, could be anything, then when I fire up that VPN, it does not get rid of that malicious code. So that malicious code could be doing anything. It could be listening to me, it could be watching me through my camera, it could be capturing my passwords, it could be capturing your VPN password, or when you connect to your bank account, it'd be capturing that. It could be capturing anything. And it could also be going in through your VPN. So it's really important to make sure that the local workstation, before you ever connect to anything, is really secure, that it has up-to-date software on it. It's been patched properly, and there's nothing on it. We're running some kind of malware detection, and even better than that, some kind of endpoint protection. And if I'm associated with a company here, I really would encourage companies to be using some endpoint security that's being watched by the security provider, because that's where it all happens, right here. All data that I work on my computer is not encrypted and is easily compromised if somebody's not watching my computer.
And of course, David, the VPN does exactly what you asked it to do. It created a nice big hole,
right,
from your house straight through to the corporate network. And when you talk to customers about security, you said it yourself, we'll have doors, we'll have locks, there'll be access control, and you wouldn't let a stranger walk around your offices. But there's strangers walking around people's homes all the time, maintenance people, delivery people, etc. That's an uncontrolled environment, and now you've opened up that home environment with a VPN and just created a nice secure path for whatever's on the wrong side of that. So
exactly right.
We see this all the time. People think that the VPN is some sort of magical device. It does a very good job of making sure someone in the middle doesn't see what you're doing. That's its purpose, right? Make sure if you're in a hotel room, someone can't see what you're entering your password. But if your home network is compromised, well, then your corporate network is compromised.
Exactly right.
Good. We have another question from Kevin. He asks, what is your view on the public cloud shared security model? Do you think that clients using the hyperscale cloud providers understand what components are their responsibility?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna comment on brands, but I do have a couple of comments about that. I am a fan of cloud computing. And here's why. I think in most cases that businesses cannot afford as much security as they really should have, and a really good cloud provider is going to have a lot of that security built in their organization. They should, especially if they're servicing larger companies who are going to demand a level of security that is good enough for the enterprise corporation. So that makes cloud computing a good thing. On the other hand, you have to think about a couple of things. First of all, I don't want to go with the cheapest cloud provider. I want to go with the best cloud provider. I want somebody who really does have their eye on security. And I need to know that. That's going to require some research. And usually you can read stuff online and find out who's using that cloud provider and so forth. Now, another thing that comes into play is where does that cloud provider store their stuff? And different countries, there's going to be different laws about how that actually can take place. But you should be asking the question, where is my data going to be sitting? Is it going to be sitting in this country, whatever country you live in and work in? And are those laws going to be govern this data? what if somebody does hack into that company and start messing around with that data? What recourse am I going to have? Where is that data? And then what happens if that cloud provider goes out of business? Who owns that data? Or what happens if that cloud provider cancels my service? They could do that. And what happens to my data? Does it actually get deleted? Is it sitting on someone's server, someone's data center somewhere that I don't know? So there's a lot of things that you sort of want to start to think about. What am I going to store in the cloud? Whose cloud is it? Where is that cloud? What laws govern that cloud? Is that cloud really secure? Is that cloud player somebody who is being looked at by the enterprise corporations and being questioned to make sure that they actually do have the security in place that they claim they have?
Yeah, to build on that point, David, I don't think people think enough about the value chain. How many people are involved in delivering your service? Because in many cases, the provider you're using is using another provider who's using another provider. That means there are a lot of assumptions along the way as to who's delivering what. And the longer that chain is, I think the more risk you've got as a business.
That's right.
And particularly with large international firms, you have these sort of standard agreements that you can't negotiate, you can't influence. Your service can change in a day's notice. The service can be terminated. It can be amended.
Right. We have some more questions. When Wesley asks what type of endpoint software on users' PCs will help with preventing penetration. I presume it's a question around the type of endpoint protection that's required. And I think it's the same things we always get to, is like, is antivirus enough? What brand? Things like that. I think it extends maybe to another question, which if you can answer Wesley's question, but we see it a lot in our SMEs, is to say, what's affordable? How much do I have to do as a small business in order to be secure? I mean, I understand my threat in my endpoint. I understand the threat in my email. What's affordable? What do we do?
Right. So that is a great question, and that's why I went through that little scenario of if I'm assessing your computing environment, I'm first going to discover what data is most important. Then I'm going to look at how you work, how you create in the life cycle of your data. And then I'm going to ask the question, what would have to be true to give you the level of protection that you need? Because every company is going to be different. And it's true, you can't go to a provider who just puts the same security solution in for everybody at the same level and that's just what they do. Because they're either under securing you because they're trying to make it super affordable, or they're over securing you because you could like build a rocket ship here. You could really go way out there, and it's too much. So that's where the balance happens. The balance is in evaluating the kind of data that you have and what that data is worth. And given how you work and how that data is used, what does your exposure look like? And there may be some things as simple as changing some of the way that you work with your data that reduces the amount of risk and reduces the amount of security technology you're going to use. But if you have a lot of people who are using phones and tablets and traveling and computing in hotels and airports and outside the country, your level of security requirement is going to go up. And number of servers, cloud versus on-prem, and there's a whole bunch of different factors there. And so sometimes you could just spend a fortune on security. Other times you could just simply change the way some of the data gets used, where it's allowed to sit, what kind of devices it can sit on, and not have as much security in place. So going through that assessment process, then your security expert, whoever's doing that risk analysis, hopefully they are in touch with the business side of this. And how do I put together the right security strategy to make this work for your business? So it is a bit of a custom fit.
I can tell you that one of the decision criteria we have, and there's 300-400 vendors that we talk to regularly, some of them focus on really, really narrow use cases, and you've got this sort of pyramid of the more you spend, you don't necessarily get an equal return on it. But one of the key areas that we look for is how well do these different systems work together? How hard is it for me to have my antivirus software and my firewall software and my email software and the network scanner software, all of which give us different indicators of compromise. You spoke about detection. How do we aggregate all that information and then act on it and correlate it? Because hackers are they don't just come through the front door when the sirens go off. You start to see some attempts on someone's PC, and then you'll see some emails coming through to those people, and someone's got to correlate those events. So a lot of the time, the choice of software has to do with open standards and has to do with how well these technologies will work together. And many times we might even lower the level of one of the components, not from a cost perspective, but because we get the data, it becomes useful to us, and we can apply things like machine learning and automation. We get 300,000 emails a second through our hosting environment. No human being can watch that amount of data. And on the firewalls, the amount of traffic, it's gigabits per second of data. And the home networks now sometimes have more bandwidth than our corporates used to have a year ago. 100 gig lines are not unheard of anymore, right? Everyone's got HD video at home. So there's massive amounts of data. And so when we help customers choose the various products they use, the first thing is, can it give us useful information that we can act upon? Because we know the penetration protection is only one aspect of it. It's important, but we need to get live information feeding our systems so that we can throw machine learning and correlation and open up tickets and support desk inquiries or incidents proactively. And we can only do that if the products all talk together. And so that's how we normally make the decision around what technology we'd recommend for a customer.
Okay. Well, it looks like we covered all the questions that have been posted. So thanks for those contributed. JJ, I think maybe a bit of a call to action, but what are the things that we can do now just to kickstart some of these discussions and helping our clients to be more secure?
Yeah, thanks, Dimitri. Well, this is important stuff. We're seeing evidence every single day around the types of risks that David has been talking about. And we live in different times now. Cybercrime, espionage, hacktivism, these are growing trends, and the attacks are coordinated. They are highly sophisticated. And our goal as a company is to try and stop this activity, or at least minimize it as much as possible for our customers. And so we'd like to help, and we'll offer an initial assessment. And it's not the normal internal vulnerability scan or give you a list of the patches that are missing on your servers. We're going to look at the areas of risk that David has talked about today. David, I'll borrow from your analogy. Like a doctor takes a patient's history, our approach to the assessment process is that we want to pick up on signs that tell us if there's further investigation needed and if there's an obvious problem. Cybercrime is often hidden, and it goes undetected and unaddressed for a long period of time until it's too late. And then it's a cancer that emerges suddenly with little recourse. And South Africans have taken a beating of late. COVID couldn't have come at a worse time. The economy is tough, business is tough. Our staff are tired, your staff are tired, and they're going to make mistakes, and they're going to let their guard down. And we want to help you minimize that risk. And we'll show you where to look. And if we find something, we'll bring it to your attention and what to do about it. And it's not going to cost you anything. We'll do this as a complimentary service because we've done business with you in the past. And one thing I just want to add to this is this is not going to be performed by our engineers. This type of risk assessment has to be conducted by a member of our leadership team. That's important because we have to balance the risk to your business with the likelihood and the impact it will have on your operations. And only really our leadership team can help you prioritize those efforts with both a technical and an operational and a business mindset to the technology. So I'd encourage everyone to take advantage of the offer. It's the next step in making you and our country more secure against cyber criminals.
Oh, that's great, JJ. Thank you very much. David, in closing, is there anything you want to cover before the wrap up?
Well, the only thing I do want to just reinforce here is that you don't see data security issues, as JJ just mentioned. They're silent, right? Hackers are good at being hidden, and it is very much like a cancer. You don't see it, and many times it pops up by something accidental happens, and someone discovers it in some routine thing later on, and then they discover it's quite advanced. And really, it's not that hard to detect it ahead of time. And if we detect it ahead of time, the cost of repairing, of remediation, is just so much easier. I just want to encourage people to start thinking of it that way. We live in a digital age, and we no longer can operate like we did in the old brick and mortar world, where computers were, in addition to, or just made things a little faster. It's the core of the business today. And so we do need to lock things down.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. If you haven't done so, I think just book that complimentary assessment online, or speak to one of our Global Micro representatives. We're happy to schedule that with you. We appreciate you all being here today, and we look forward to next time. Thank you very much, David. Appreciate you attending. That's really kind. Thank you.
Thank you.